So when Daredevil was released in 2003, it was met with mostly scornful reviews. It kind of set Ben Affleck on that path to being kind of ridiculed and disrespected as an actor before he really proved himself as a filmmaker. And, you know, it's not a terrible film, the theatrical cut, but yeah, a year or so later, Mark Steven Johnson, the director, was able to release his original cut, the director's cut of the film. And it's actually much better than the theatrical cut. Now, theatrical cut is a film that I still enjoyed anyway when it came out. I wasn't as down on it as most people, but I enjoyed it. It was just a fast-moving, quite fun comic book movie. But I feel like the director's cut does give it a lot more depth, as well as take things out that were kind of shot for the theatrical cut, like the love scene, the famous by the fire love scene that was really cheesy and just left a bit of a bad taste in the mouth. That's taken out. And instead, stuff that's put in is things that actually are more warranted, things that you want there, you know? We've got this film in which this man, Matt Murdock, he's a lawyer, a blind lawyer, but he's got superpowers, so he can see, but it's all like through sonar vision, but it makes him like very, almost like a bat, where he can just like pinpoint with great accuracy certain things because he's seeing through this sonar vision. But he's a lawyer. He goes after criminals in the courts by day, and when he fails to get them through the justice system, he goes out at night as a superhero, Daredevil, and gets them that way instead. Now, in the theatrical cut, the whole lawyer aspect of Matt Murdock really never felt like much. It just felt like it was there in the background. We knew he's a lawyer, but then it didn't really come into play with regards to anything he was doing. Whereas in the director's cut, there's an extra half hour added. Once you take out the stuff that was taken out and then put this stuff back in, there's half an hour of like new stuff. And much of that is this court case with this character played by Coolio, in which Matt Murdock represents him. And we see over the course of the movie, through various scenes, the trial. And it adds so much more to the character of Matt Murdock, in the sense that it tells us who he is, what he's about, that he's, you know, the whole point of Matt Murdock's character is that he represents the little guy. He goes after the cases nobody else wants because they're for people who are underrepresented, who nobody wants to listen to. And this whole case that we see throughout the film is linked to that. And not only is it linked to that, but it's linked to the main story of the Kingpin. The murder that takes place there ultimately is the link that gets Matt Murdock to go after the Kingpin. So the whole thing is tied together much more seamlessly in a way that feels much more organic and like an actual story is being told, rather than just here's an action set piece, here's another action set piece, and here's another action set piece. And it's just like there's work done there on the characters. Now, I'm not saying this is Citizen Kane of comic book movies. You know, it's still like your bog standard average comic book movie, but it's very enjoyable, and it's very disheartening to see a director's vision just get mauled yet again. You know, it happened with Richard Donner, it happened with Zack Snyder, it happened here with a lesser filmmaker in Mark Steven Johnson, admittedly, but with all due respect to the man, he made a better film than the one the studio put out. And yet he's probably the one who took most of the flack for the one that was put out. Now, I watched the behind-the-scenes featurette of putting together the director's cut that was on the DVD. And it's interesting to just see these talking heads of the people who were involved, particularly the producers. One producer in particular, his name escapes me right now, but he genuinely believes the theatrical cut was the best edition. At least that's what he says. I don't buy it for a minute. And like when you hear him talking, you know that he's just a boardroom member. He's not interested in story. He's not interested in character. He's interested in making money. And he thinks the best way to make money is to put something out there that is just fast action, and that's it. And that's what they did. So they made a director compromise his vision, bring the film down to 2 hours, get it out, and it just didn't work. Or an hour and 40 minutes, I think, the theatrical cut. But yeah, it wasn't as good. It suffered from that meddling, from that interference. And here, again, like I say, it's not the best film ever, but it flows a lot more beautifully. There's a lot more character moments. I feel like I know more who Matt Murdock is, why he does what he does, and why he operates in this city in the way that he does. Because this city is part of him, in much the same way Gotham City is part of Batman. But when you don't have Matt Murdock interacting with the little people, interacting with the people that he fights for, then you lose that. You lose the sense of that part of his character. The film does suffer from like that early 2000s CGI. There's some really bad CGI here, but I wouldn't say it suffers any more than, say, the likes of Spider-Man that was released a year prior to this. You look at some of the effects work now in that first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. There's some dodgy stuff there with Spider-Man that just is really weightless. And I think in some ways, Daredevil still doesn't look great at times with the CGI, but I actually think it looks better. It holds up more in places than the likes of, say, Spider-Man. I think a lot of that is because many scenes within Spider-Man take place in broad daylight, whereas everything in Daredevil, all the action stuff takes place at night. He dresses up as Daredevil at night. So when you do that kind of effects work in darkness, it masks a lot of sins. There's a cool soundtrack to this. It feels very dated now. There's a lot of that Evanescence kind of emo rock kind of stuff going on. But back then, I'm going to hold my hand up and say I was listening to Evanescence back then. Not so much anymore, but watching the film again this time around, it did give me a bit of a nostalgic feeling towards the early noughties when I was listening to all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it again, like I say, it dates the film. I know a lot of people talk up Colin Farrell in this film. They're like, he's just off the chain, kind of wacky, like full-on comic book villain. And as someone who is an absolute die-hard Colin Farrell fan, love the guy. I'll watch anything he's in. I think he's usually the best thing about whatever he's in. In Bruges, he's one of my favourite movies of all time. I love Colin Farrell. But I will say, I do think he does overplay it a bit here. And that could be down to the direction as well from Johnson, but there are times when he does look a little bit silly. Even so, I do think Farrell's Bullseye is a fun character. I do enjoy watching him, and he kind of lightens proceedings. He kind of livens it up as well. Michael Clarke Duncan as Kingpin is also pretty effective. Obviously, this guy was a monster. He was just like such a huge guy. You'll remember him from the Green Mile and things like that. He always played these hulking guys. So it was a role that was tailor-made for him. But his physical presence, particularly in the final fight scene, which has been extended, so it's a bit more brutal. In the theatrical cut, you had all this build-up to them two meeting, and then the fight was done and dusted like that. Whereas here, it's a lot more brutal. The sound design on that also helps because as they're slamming into walls and Knuckles are hitting faces, it's just a lot of crunching sounds. Some really good sound design on that. And obviously as well, we get into Matt Murdock's head when a lot of the stuff that he operates on is on sound waves and things like that. So that allows the sound design team to really go to town on that side of things. which again, like I say, it makes that fight scene a lot more bone crunching, a lot more dramatic. And finally, we've got Jennifer Garner, who is Elektra, and I really like her in it. I can see why they gave her a spin-off movie. She's a really good kind of standout supporting character that deserves her own movie. So Daredevil, the director's cut, is a real step up from the theatrical cut for me. If you saw the theatrical and you're a bit ho-hum on it and you've never seen this one, check it out. It is a definite improvement. Yeah, solid stuff. 3.5 out of 5 from me. The theatrical cut, I'd probably go with a 2.5. But this one, yeah, clearly makes it a star higher at the least. It's fun stuff. 3.5 out of 5 from me. But what about you? Have you seen Daredevil, the director's cut? And if so, how would you compare it to the theatrical cut? Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the faster pace of the theatrical cut or the more story and character of the director's cut? You know my thoughts. Let me know yours down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching this video, and until next time, crack it.